Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. The main character, after dying in his previous life, he wakes up as Spider-Man inside of Teen Wolf. What is Spider-Man gonna do inside of Teen Wolf?
And useful. Peter discovered how much his rescue technique assumed full mobility. Canimer venom did not need to completely paralyze him. It only needed to take the wrong limb at the wrong time. So he built redundancy. Can fire web from either wrist independently. Cannot with one hand against wall adhesion. Can use teeth, Styles suggested. Everyone said no unless extreme. Can move a person with legs and one arm using sheet or coat. Can signal help. That last one was the biggest. Peter's old instinct during impairment was still compensate alone. Deaton made him practice saying, "I need help." Peter hated. Styles loved. Again. "I need help." Louder. "I need help." Emotion. Peter webbed Styles's shoe to the floor. Deaton almost smiled. The real use came weeks later, when Peter's left hand went numb after a Canimer graze. Instead of hiding it from Scott, he said immediately, "Left arm compromised." Scott adjusted position. No surprise. No delayed failure. Small communication prevented a worse injury. Peter began using short status phrases with the group. Web low. Left numb. Sense unclear. Mask damaged. No speeches. No pretending. Styles wrote them into the board's emergency section. Peter objected to the board expanding again. Lost. The Canimer had forced Peter to confront the difference between adaptability and self-sufficiency. He was very adaptable. That did not mean he was required to improvise alone every time something went wrong. Asterisk Chapter 24, The Price of Flight. Scott wanted to tell Jackson. Styles wanted to lock Jackson in a room. Peter wanted evidence first. They argued in the McCall kitchen while Melissa worked a night shift. Styles had printed pages spread across the table. Canimer, human by day, giant murder lizard by night. We have a suspect who is a human by day and a giant personality problem all the time. Scott rubbed his face. That's not evidence. Styles pointed at Peter. He saw Jackson during the attack. I saw Jackson in the structure. Exactly. Peter shook his head. That could mean target, witness, controller, coincidence. Styles stared. You're ruining detective work with categories. You're welcome. Scott said, we can't wait until he kills someone. Peter looked. No. That was the tension. Evidence threshold versus imminent danger. They made a practical plan. Observe Jackson during the next likely transformation. Do not confront alone. If he changes, contain. If not, stop treating him like guilty, because weird things happen around him. Scott hated following Jackson. Styles loved it too much. Peter kept both in line. The lacrosse field after rain gave them the first real clue. Jackson stayed late. Angry. Missing periods of time. Peter sat high in the bleachers with a hoodie and no mask. Scott waited near the locker room. Styles was in the Jeep with a camera he had no business owning. Jackson stopped beside a puddle. His reflection moved. Not metaphorically. It smiled after his actual face stopped. Peter's spider sense tightened. Guys. Scott's phone buzzed. Jackson staggered. Then the lights went out. Peter changed behind the bleachers. Spider-Man reached the locker room first. Jackson was on the floor. Human. Claw marks on the wall. No Canema. Scott entered. Jackson. Jackson woke. What the hell? He had no memory. Peter looked at the scratches. Fresh. Could the transformation have happened and reverted within seconds? Or something else had been here? The spider sense pointed toward the ceiling vent. Peter climbed. A wet trail. Venom. Canema had left. Jackson remained below. Separate locations at the same moment. Maybe Jackson had reverted before Peter reached. Still not proof. Styles arrived. Please tell me you got a lizard. No. Great. Jackson saw Spider-Man. His face twisted. Who invited him? Peter kept the altered voice. Your charming personality. Jackson looked at Scott. What is happening? Scott almost told. Peter shook his head slightly. Not here. Not before they knew. Then Jackson's reflection in the metal locker moved again. The reflected hand became scaled. Jackson did not see. Peter did. The warning sharpened. Not immediate attack. Internal chain. Peter stepped closer. Jackson backed. Don't. Peter stopped. Consent. Even with danger, grabbing someone to test was still grabbing. Do you lose time? Jackson's face changed. Why? Answer. Sometimes. Scott looked alarmed. Jackson said, I wake up places. Styles's humor disappeared. Peter asked, blood. Jackson went pale. There. He knew enough to be afraid of himself. That changed the conversation. Peter removed the mask only after the locker room doors were locked, and Jackson had agreed to hear the truth. Jackson stared at Peter Parker's face. Then Scott. Then Styles. You. Peter said, yes. Jackson laughed once. No. Scott's eyes flashed gold. Jackson stopped laughing. The truth hit all at once. Werewolves. Spider-Man. Canema. Potentially him. Jackson sat. You think I'm that thing? Peter said, we think you might be connected. Styles looked at him. Peter ignored. Jackson's hands shook. If I am. Scott answered first. We stop it. Kill me. No. Peter said, not if there is another way. Jackson looked. Not if. Honesty hurt. If you're about to kill someone and we cannot stop you any other way, I'm not promising impossible things. Scott looked at Peter. Harsh. Necessary. Peter continued. But we're nowhere near that conclusion. Jackson looked at the wall. For once, arrogance gone. I don't want to hurt anyone. Peter believed him. That did not make him safe. They involved Deaton. Jackson hated. Still agreed to testing. The first controlled attempt at containment failed because the Canema did not transform on command. The second produced partial scales when Jackson's fear spiked. Peter watched. Not monster emerging because evil. A body responding to something unresolved and perhaps someone else's control. Deaton explained the role of a master. Jackson's face hardened. So someone can make me do this. Potentially, Deaton said. Peter looked at him. Jackson had spent years needing control over how people saw him. Now his body itself might belong to someone else's command. Peter understood why rage arrived. He sat beside him after. No mask. You don't have to trust us. Jackson laughed bitterly. That's reassuring. But if you feel the change coming, call. Why you? Peter thought. Because webs might hold for seconds. Because spider sense could warn. Because he had already been paralyzed once and survived. Because he knew what it felt like to wake in a life that did not feel chosen. Because I'll come. Jackson looked at him. No pack vow. No friendship. A phone number. That night Peter added Jackson to the list of people around the secret. Not because Jackson knew everything. Because the monster and the victim had become the same person, and Peter refused to let Beacon Hills pretend solving one meant discarding the other. Jackson's first voluntary containment attempt lasted 6 minutes before he panicked. Deaton's room had no bars. That was deliberate. Padded walls. Open door. Web anchors ready, but not attached. Scott outside. Peter inside with Jackson, because Jackson had asked for one person, not a crowd. How do we start? Jackson asked. Peter looked. You tell me. Jackson hated that. I don't know. Then we sit. They sat. No transformation. Jackson's hands shook. The waiting itself became pressure. He looked at the door. It's open. Yes. If I leave. You leave. What if I change in the hall? Then we respond. Jackson laughed bitterly. Great system. Peter did not defend. After 3 minutes, scales appeared near Jackson's wrist. His breathing spiked. Web me. Do you want that now? Yes. Peter applied one loose line around forearms, enough to give feedback without pinning. Jackson pulled. The line held. More scales. More. Peter added, torso anchor to wall. Jackson's eyes changed. The canema emerged. The line snapped. Peter moved. Spider sense fired. He could have layered everything immediately. Instead, he kept the door open. The canema lunged toward it. Peter webbed the frame partially, creating resistance but not a sealed cage. Jackson hit the line. Stopped. Turned. Human voice came through for a second. Close it. Peter hesitated. Now. Yes. Peter webbed the door fully. The room became sealed. Jackson's panic exploded. Bad. The canema thrashed harder. Peter saw immediately. The closed door had turned safety into trap. He tore the web open again. The canema lunged into the hall. Scott was ready. He guided back with wolf presence without attacking. Jackson returned. The transformation eased. 6 minutes. Then human. Jackson sat on the floor. That was terrible. Yes. Why did opening the door help? Peter thought. Because you knew leaving was still yours. Jackson looked. They redesigned. No sealed door unless Jackson asked, and confirmed twice or immediate civilian danger. Web barriers became directional, not total. The next attempt lasted 12 minutes. Then 20. No miracle. No cure. A body learning that containment did not always mean captivity. Peter understood the relevance to himself more than he wanted. The mask could become a cage. The secret could. The rules could. Any protection did if release disappeared. He did not turn the thought into a speech for Jackson. The room was about Jackson. That was another form of restraint. Asterisk Chapter 25. The Spider Sense Awakens. The stranger who crashed through the school parking lot looked human until he raised one hand and the air folded. Peter had been walking with Styles when the first car alarm went off. A man stumbled between parked vehicles. Blood on his shirt. No shoes. Eyes wild. Police sirens approaching. The stranger looked at Peter. Peter. Peter stopped. He had never seen him. Spider Sense screamed. Styles heard the name. Friend. No. The stranger fell. A pulse rolled outward. Not magic, Peter understood. Not werewolf. The nearest windshield cracked in a perfect circle. Peter moved. He shoved Styles behind a bus and crouched beside the man. How do you know my name? The stranger grabbed his sleeve. Spider. Styles's eyes widened. Peter's heart stopped for one beat. No mask. Public parking lot. Police coming. The man knew. He was also bleeding badly. Peter could run to protect identity. Or help. He helped. Styles' bus door. Styles opened the emergency side. Peter lifted the stranger and moved him behind cover. A web splint would be impossible without exposing more. He used his belt and a broken sign support. Ordinary first aid. The man gasped. Not safe. What isn't? Thread. Peter looked. A thin red filament clung to the man's coat. Not web. Something else. When Peter touched near it, Spider Sense went silent. Not calm. Gone. That frightened him more than screaming. He pulled his hand back. The sense returned. The thread suppressed his warning. Styles saw Peter's face. What? Peter whispered. I couldn't feel anything. Sirens closer. The stranger said, they learn. Then the air behind him tore. Not a portal with another world visible. More like a distortion around the Nemeton's supernatural pressure, a pulse that folded distance for a fraction of a second. Deaton later would call it a rift-like phenomenon tied to disturbed Lee energy. Peter had no name now. The stranger vanished. Not teleported cleanly. Dragged. The red thread remained. Police arrived. Peter and Styles stood behind the bus looking guilty. Sheriff Stalinsky got out. Why are you here? Styles said, school. His father looked around the empty parking lot. At 7 at night. Extracurricular. Peter wanted to disappear. The sheriff saw blood. His face changed. Whose? Peter answered, a man fell. Where is he? Both looked at the empty ground. Styles said, complicated. The sheriff closed his eyes. Peter appreciated him deeply. At Deaton's clinic, the red thread went inside a sealed jar. Spider Sense faded whenever Peter moved close. Scott tested. His wolf hearing became muffled. Derek tested. Scent perception dulled. The material suppressed supernatural warning systems broadly. Not powers entirely. Attention. Senses. Deaton looked disturbed. Beacon Hills has had barriers, poisons, rituals. This is different. Peter stared at the strand. Who made it? Unknown. No convenient answer. The stranger had known Peter's name. Spider. Maybe Spider-Man. Maybe Peter Parker. Could be someone who had studied sightings. Styles wanted to call it reality thread. Peter refused. That's how bad names become theories. Styles looked hurt. They labeled it. Red filament dampens supernatural perception. Boring. Useful. The stranger was not found. No body. No missing person match in sheriff records yet. The event did one important thing. It showed Peter a countermeasure specifically dangerous to him. Hunters or other enemies could eventually learn to silence spider sense. He could not build his entire combat style around it. Derek said that without sympathy. Train blind. Peter hated. Then agreed. They began the next day. Mask lenses darkened. Earplugs. No spider sense. They could not turn it off voluntarily, but Deaton placed a sealed thread sample nearby behind protective glass to dampen enough. Peter trained movement by touch, air memory. Terrible. He hit Derek twice, accidentally. Derek enjoyed too much. Peter learned. At school, the stranger's blood had left one name in Peter's head. His own. Not proof of identity breach. Not proof of prophecy. Just a warning that someone outside the current factions knew more than expected. Peter told May. She listened. Does this mean our house is targeted? I don't know. Then what changes? Peter thought. Not panic. Not moving automatically. Better cameras, a safe place to go if I text. May nodded. Good. They did that. No fortress. No secret relocation. The unknown threat earned preparation proportional to evidence. Peter was getting better at that. The red filament stayed, sealed at Deaton's. No hero trophy under the bed. No experiment without a question. That was another improvement. Asterisk Chapter 26, The Truth Beneath. The Canema crossed the school rooftops like gravity had offended it personally. Spider-Man followed. Every landing jarred Peter's knees. The creature barely seemed to touch the tiles. Below, students were still inside for an evening event. Too many people. Too much glass. Peter could not let the chase descend. He fired web ahead. A layered net between two HVAC units. The Canema hit. Held for 1 second. Peter arrived. The tail cut through. Still hate that. The creature hissed. Peter's spider sense pointed at the tail. Then the skylight behind him. A student had climbed onto a maintenance ladder below, trying to see the noise. Peter saw the boy's face through glass. The Canema lunged. Peter could take the clean shot. A full-strength kick, while it was airborne, might throw it off the roof. Could injure Jackson badly. Instead, Peter fired downward. Webb struck the student's jacket through the open top vent beside the skylight and yanked him off the ladder before the Canema's tail shattered the glass. The tail needle grazed Peter's thigh. Cold. Paralysis. Again. Peter stumbled. The Canema escaped over the next roof. Peter's left leg locked. He caught himself on a wall with one hand. Below, the student screamed. Not hurt. Terrified. Peter used his remaining mobility to descend. He landed awkwardly. Run. The student stared at the mask. Spider-Man. Yes, go. That worked. Peter webbed his own leg to a straight position and used the line like a brace. Stupid. Functional. Scott arrived minutes later. He looked up at the disappearing Canema. You let it go. I pulled a kid. Scott immediately regretted the tone. I didn't mean. I know. Peter's leg went numb completely. Scott caught him. Venom. Small dose. They moved to Deaton. Jackson arrived later in human form. He had no memory. There was a fresh cut on his arm matching where one web strand had caught the Canema. Proof. Not absolute, but strong. Jackson stared at it. So it's me. Deaton said, very likely. Jackson sat. Silence. Peter's paralysis faded slowly. No one celebrated the answer. Now they had a person to save, and a monster someone else might be commanding. Styles found the master clue through behavior patterns. The Canema attacked people connected to certain grievances. Not random. Someone was using Jackson. They mapped victims. Teacher, student, guard. The connections formed around a person Peter did not immediately suspect. Matt Diehler. Styles did. Camera guy. Peter looked. Why? Because he is always there. That is a bad reason. Also, every victim was on the swim team connected to the drowning incident. Better. They investigated. Peter insisted no breaking into Matt's house without stronger evidence. Styles looked personally wounded. They found yearbook photos instead. Public records. School archives. The connection strengthened. Matt had nearly drowned while the others laughed. Trauma. Resentment. Potential motive. Not permission for murder. Peter thought about Elias. A life spent feeling invisible. He had died wanting to live, not hurt people. Being ignored did not automatically create monsters. Choices still existed. They confronted Matt only after seeing him issue a command to Jackson. Peter's mask was on. Scott beside. Styles behind. Matt looked at Spider-Man. You're not supposed to be here. Popular sentence. Matt held a phone camera like token tied to the supernatural bond. He told Jackson to attack. Jackson transformed. The change was horrifying now that Peter knew the person. Bones. Scales. Loss. Peter did not punch. He webbed. Layered. Scott talked to Jackson. Styles went for the control object. Matt panicked and redirected. The Canema's tail struck Peter's shoulder. He felt the venom. Still moved because adrenaline and lower dose. Scott got one arm around Jackson. Fight him. Peter hated the wording. Jackson was already fighting. His human hand emerged for 1 second. Enough. Styles grabbed the control object. Matt tackled. Peter webbed Matt to the wall. Not violently. The bond flickered. Jackson collapsed. Human. Alive. Matt screamed about what had happened to him. About no one caring. Peter listened. Then said, they hurt you. Matt stopped. Yes. Peter continued. That doesn't make the people you're hurting into them. Matt's face twisted. Not a cure. Not forgiveness. But someone had finally named the difference. Police sirens. Sheriff. The supernatural explanation would be hard. Deaton and Scott handled what they could. Peter disappeared before the mask became a statement. At home, May noticed the limp. Venom again. Less. You sound proud. I'm not. She handed him food. Peter sat. The Canema problem was not solved yet. Matt's control had been disrupted, but Jackson's transformation remained. Gerard still existed. Hunters still wanted a weapon or corpse. Peter's new rule was simple. Knowing who the monster is does not mean you know what the person needs. Beacon Hills kept punishing easy answers. Peter was beginning to be grateful for that. Chapter 27, The Rift. Gerard Argent built the safe house like a lesson in choices. One captive supernatural witness in the back room. One camera pointed at the entrance. One hunter team outside. One envelope containing photographs of Peter Parker's house. Spider-Man landed on the roof and felt his stomach drop. Gerard had crossed the line from suspicion to leverage. The safe house was disguised as a veterinary office on the edge of town. Peter could hear the captive inside. Breathing fast, Gerard spoke through an external speaker. "Come in." Peter did not. "Your friend is bleeding." Peter's spider sense pointed everywhere. Doors, windows, roof vent. The red filament technology had not appeared, but Gerard had learned enough about Spider-Man's habits. A civilian or supernatural victim in danger. Peter would come. That was the weakness Gerard wanted to own. Peter climbed along the roof. The camera followed. Motorized. He webbed a small mirror to a vent and angled it. Reflection. Inside office, Gerard waited with mountain ash and weapons. The captive sat beyond a glass partition. Peter did not know him. That should not matter. Gerard's voice came. "You can save him." Peter looked at the photographs in the envelope through the window. May leaving the house. Peter at school. Stiles's Jeep. Scott. Identity leverage. He wanted anger. Peter gave him planning. First camera. One web. Lens covered. Gerard laughed. "There are more." Peter shut off the building's external breaker with a web yank from distance. Emergency lights came on. Good. He used the dark transition. Roof vent. Inside ceiling. Spider sense warned the first panel. Trap. Peter moved around. Second panel. No warning until a hunter below raised a rifle. Peter stayed above. He reached the back room. The captive smelled like werewolf to Peter only through contextual clues, not actual smell. He saw claws under stress. Mountain ash ring. Peter could cross. The captive could not. Gerard had expected Spider-Man to step through the obvious doorway under cameras. Peter did something else. He webbed the ash from above. A wide, sticky sheet pressed onto the floor. Then he pulled. The powder lifted with the web like tape. The ring broke. The werewolf stared. Peter dropped. "Can you move?" "A who?" Later. A hunter opened the rear door. Peter shut it with web. Another came through the side. The werewolf growled. Peter said, "Exit first." The man looked at him, then ran through the broken ring. Peter followed. Gerard waited in the corridor. Old. Calm. Dangerous. You protect monsters. Peter stopped. I protect people. Naive. Maybe. Gerard held a small remote. The office front display lit. Photos of Peter Parker. May. One press could send them somewhere. Maybe. Gerard wanted the mask off in exchange. Peter's spider sense sharpened. Not from Gerard. From the ceiling behind him. A hunter hidden. Peter moved before the shot. The bullet hit Gerard's display. Screen shattered. Gerard swore. Peter fired web the remote. Pulled. Gerard resisted. Peter let go. The remote flew backward into the wall and broke. No proof it had been connected to anything. Peter did not gamble on terror. He webbed the hidden rifle, then the front lights, then every loose paper on Gerard's table. Pages flew to the ceiling. Hunter files, photographs, maps, Spider-Man's information network exposed. Gerard's face changed. Peter saw what mattered. Not pain. Control of the archive. He could steal everything. He didn't. He webbed the files together and left them hanging where Chris Argent could later see exactly what Gerard had been collecting. Internal accountability. More useful than Peter hoarding. Gerard stepped closer. You think my family will turn on me? I think they deserve to know what you put their names beside. Gerard smiled. Your aunt. Peter's body went cold. May isn't part of this. She became part when you wore the mask. That was the threat Peter feared. Also partly true. May already knew. That changed Gerard's leverage. Peter said, she knows. Gerard's expression shifted. Tiny. There. He had assumed May was blind. Peter continued. Not everything enough. The old man had less power over a secret already shared voluntarily. That mattered. Sarins approached. Styles and Chris had been alerted separately. Gerard heard. His smile returned. This isn't over. Peter said, nothing here ever is. He escaped through the roof. Chris Argent arrived below. Peter watched from a distant ledge as Chris entered the safe house and found the files webbed to the ceiling. One page had his daughter's photograph next to a threat assessment. Another tracked Scott. Another May. Chris stood very still. Gerard's own methods had become visible to his family. Peter left. He did not need to see the argument. At home, he told May immediately that Gerard had photos. May's face hardened. Do we leave? Peter looked. This was her choice, too. Maybe for a few nights. May thought. Then we leave for a few nights. No hero objection. No pretending staying proved courage. They stayed with a friend outside Beacon Hills under an ordinary excuse. Peter commuted to school. Spider-Man patrolled less visibly. Gerard had found the weakness. Peter answered by making the people around him less isolated, not by promising enemies could never reach them. That was not invulnerability. It was harder to weaponize. Gerard's photographs of May changed one thing Peter had not anticipated. May wanted to see the Hunter file. Peter almost refused. Then caught himself. The photos were about her. She had the right to know what had been collected. Chris provided copies after securing Gerard's safe house. May sat at the kitchen table with them spread out. Grocery store. Work. Front porch. Peter beside her in two. One taken through a windshield. May's face became very still. How long? At least weeks. Peter hated. May turned one over. A note in Gerard's handwriting. Primary leverage. Peter's stomach twisted. May saw. Don't. What? Do not turn that into proof you should have kept me more ignorant. Peter looked. She tapped the words. He decided what I was. Leverage. Not person. May continued. If I didn't know anything and he took me, I'd be easier to scare. True. Knowing makes me more dangerous to him. Peter almost smiled. May pulled out a pen. On the back of each photo, she wrote the date if known and where she had actually been going. Not because Gerard needed. Because the file had reduced her life to Peter's movements. She restored context. The grocery photo, buying cake ingredients for a coworker. The porch, waiting for a plumber. The car, driving to a doctor's appointment. Ordinary life. Gerard had seen leverage. May saw herself. Peter understood the importance. They built May's safety plan together. Not Peter dictating. If watched, document before confronting. If followed, drive to public police location. No leading surveillance home deliberately. Code word with Peter. Sheriff non-emergency. One overnight bag. Not permanent running. May chose what she was willing to change. She refused to stop working. Refused to stop seeing friends. Agreed to vary routes only when evidence suggested active surveillance. Peter wanted more. May said no. He accepted. The next time a car followed her for 3 turns, she did exactly the plan. Drove to sheriff station. The car left. License captured by camera. Registered to a hunter shell organization connected to Gerard. Evidence. Peter wanted to chase. Sheriff called first. Don't. Peter stared at phone. He's following May. And I have a plate. I'm faster. That isn't the same as better. May, beside him, nodded. Peter hated 2 adults agreeing. He did not chase. The vehicle was found, abandoned later. No dramatic capture. But the surveillance route was burned. Gerard's leverage decreased because May had her own response. Peter looked at the old note. Primary leverage. He crossed it out on the copy. May took the pen. No. Peter looked. She wrote beside it. Person. Then closed the folder. That was the last word Gerard got to have in their house. Asterisk chapter 28. The spider's web tightens. Scott said the quiet part out loud in the McCall kitchen. What if killing the Kanema is the only way to stop it? Rain hammered the window. Styles stopped flipping through the bestiary. Peter leaned against the counter with one healing puncture near his shoulder and no mask. No one answered immediately. That was good. Scott looked at Peter. You keep saying Jackson is still a person. He is. What if he kills somebody tomorrow? Then we stop him tomorrow. How? Peter heard the fear under the anger. Scott was tired of being responsible for impossible choices. Peter knew the feeling. We build better containment. Styles rubbed his face. We've tried webs, chains, mountain ash, Derek yelling heartfelt speeches. Mountain ash doesn't work on Jackson the same way, Peter said. I know, I was listing the trauma. Scott pushed off the table. This isn't a joke. Styles went quiet. Peter looked at Scott. No, it isn't. The room stayed tense. Peter continued. I am not saying we never use lethal force. I'm saying deciding now that Jackson is easier to kill turns every future choice into proof we were right. Scott stared. What if that gets someone killed? Peter's answer came slower. Then we live with that decision too. No clean path. That was the point. The argument shifted when Jackson appeared at the back door. Everyone froze. He looked exhausted. Human. I can hear you. Styles closed the book. Jackson came in. Nice to know we're at the murder me stage. Scott started. Jackson. Don't. Peter watched him. No spider sense spike. Not immediate danger. Jackson sat. I lost 4 hours. His hands trembled. When I came back, There was blood under my nails. The room changed. Not hypothetical anymore. Jackson looked at Peter. Tell me the truth. Peter knew what he wanted. Could the Kanama be stopped without killing Jackson? I don't know. Jackson laughed bitterly. Of course. But we're trying. That's comforting. It's what I have. Jackson looked at Scott. If I change and I go after someone, do not let me kill them. Scott nodded. Jackson continued. If you can't stop me. Peter cut in. No death contracts. Jackson's eyes flashed anger. Peter held. You don't get to make us promise to kill you while you're scared. It's my life. Yes. Then my choice. Not if the choice is being made, because you think becoming dangerous makes you disposable. Jackson stood. I am not asking for therapy from Spider-Man. Good, I'm Peter right now. Styles made a tiny face, like not helping. Peter kept going. You can tell us what you want. You cannot make fear the only version of you we listen to. Jackson stared, then sat again. The anger broke enough for the next step. They built an emergency plan, with Jackson involved. He would text one word if memory gaps started. Blackout. Scott and Peter would respond. Styles would track location. Deaton would prepare a safe room without restraints designed to injure. Jackson could revoke non-emergency access to his room and phone. This wasn't a prison disguised as help. The first test came sooner than anyone wanted. Jackson texted * blackout at 1:12 a.m. Peter woke instantly. May heard him moving. Call me after. I will. He masked and went. Jackson was in the school locker room. Half shifted. No master visibly present. Scott arrived from the other side. Peter's spider sense fired. Jackson's tail formed. Peter used layered webs across the room exits. Not to hold Jackson in one place. To keep him away from the hallway, while leaving one controlled route toward the gym. Scott used his voice. Jackson. The Kanama hissed. Peter opened the gym route. Move him, don't corner. Scott understood. They guided. Jackson attacked twice. Peter dodged. Scott took one scratch. No lethal hit. In the gym, Deaton's padded containment frame waited. Not a cage. A set of web anchors, heavy mats, and clear space. Jackson's body thrashed. Peter added web lines as needed. No one tied his neck. No one placed Mountain Ash. No one shouted that he was a monster. Eventually, the shift faded. Jackson woke on the mat. He looked at the room. Then Peter. No one dead. No. Scott sat against the wall, bleeding lightly. No one dead. Jackson closed his eyes. Relief looked almost like pain. Peter understood the temptation to call the night a success. It wasn't complete. The master still existed. Jackson could still transform. Scott was hurt. Everyone had lost sleep. But they had proven one thing. A dangerous transformation did not automatically require a corpse. That mattered enough. The next morning, Peter went to school late. Melissa McCall wrote both Scott and Peter notes because she believed they had helped with an emergency. She looked at Peter. You look terrible. Thanks. That wasn't a compliment. Peter smiled. The adults around Beacon Hills were becoming part of the support system without always knowing the full map. That could not stay indefinite. But for now, the Knight's choices held. Jackson sat 2 rows ahead in English. He did not look back. At lunch, he texted Peter one word. Thanks. Peter did not reply with anything dramatic. Anytime. Not a pack oath. Not a promise he could always save him. Just availability. Sometimes that was enough to keep fear from making the next decision alone. Asterisk chapter 29. The Spider Sense and the Stranger. Lydia Martin described a death before anyone knew there was a body. That was how Peter learned Spider Sense did not only react to things that could hurt him. They were in the school corridor when Lydia stopped walking. Her face went blank. Peter's warning flared so hard he turned toward the nearest stairwell. Nothing. No attacker. No falling object. Lydia whispered, "Someone is screaming." Styles looked around. "I don't hear anything." Scott did. Maybe not sound exactly. Peter looked at Lydia. "Where?" She pointed toward the funeral home across town. Then blinked. "What?" Everyone stared. Lydia's expression sharpened. "I hate when you all do that." Peter said, "You said someone was screaming." "I did not." Scott looked at Styles. Styles looked at Peter. Lydia walked away. Peter's spider sense continued pointing. Not danger to him. Grief. Death. A supernatural signal attached to Lydia. They followed later, carefully. The funeral home had no active service. A side door stood unlocked. Peter did not break in wearing a mask. He and Styles went as curious teenagers with a very bad excuse about a school project. The attendant let them wait near the front. Lydia arrived on her own 10 minutes later. She looked furious. "Did you follow me?" "No," Styles said. "Yes," Peter said. Styles turned. Peter shrugged. Lydia stared. "At least one of you is honest." Then the spider sense hit again. Peter looked toward a locked side corridor. Lydia did too. No one had made a sound. She walked. Peter followed. The attendant called after. Styles improvised. "Bathroom." "Wrong way," the man shouted. Too late. Lydia stopped at a closed preparation room door. Her face went pale. "Open it." Peter's warning pulsed from behind. Not an attack. He looked at Lydia. "Why?" "I don't know." "That's not enough to break into." She screamed. The sound did not sound entirely human. Every light flickered. Peter's ears rang. The door latch snapped. Inside lay a body. New. Not prepared. A young man the funeral home had not logged yet. The attendant arrived and went white. Police followed. Sheriff Stalinsky separated everyone. Peter sat in a chair under fluorescent lights, pretending he had not felt the body before seeing it. Lydia said nothing. Styles watched his father work. The sheriff asked Peter why he entered a restricted hall. Lydia heard something. "What?" Peter looked at Lydia. Her choice. She said a scream. The sheriff looked at the dead man. "From him." Lydia's hands shook. "I don't know." The sheriff did not mock. That mattered. Later Deaton explained Banshee law. Lydia's connection to death. Not a curse, exactly. A form of perception. Peter listened. So my spider sense reacted to her signal. Perhaps. Why? Deaton folded his hands. Because your sense may interpret imminent supernatural significance as danger, even when the danger is not directed at you. Peter hated how vague that was. That makes it less useful. It makes it broader. Same problem. The next day, Lydia confronted him. Not Spider-Man. Peter, you know something. He could lie. Instead, he said, I know Beacon Hills does not have normal explanations for everything. That's not an answer. No. She looked at him. You felt it too. Peter stayed quiet. Lydia noticed. Her eyes narrowed. You did. He said, I felt something. What? A warning. About me. I don't know. She laughed without humor. Everyone's favorite phrase. Peter understood. She was surrounded by people treating her experience like clues to their problems. He shifted. Do you want me to tell anyone what happened? Lydia looked. No. Then I won't unless someone is in immediate danger. That changed her expression. No request for proof. No demand to perform. A boundary. Lydia sat on the bench beside him. What if I hear another one? Call someone you trust. Who? Peter almost said Scott. Styles. Deaton. Himself. Instead, you choose. Lydia stared. Then said, fine, give me your number. He did. Not Spider-Man's burner. Peter's. That mattered. Weeks later, when her Banshee abilities intensified, Lydia had an option that did not begin with someone trying to explain her to herself. Peter's spider sense remained confusing. It pointed at grief sometimes, at magic, at threat. He stopped asking it to categorize. He wrote, warning is not a label. The rule fit more than combat. Lydia's scream had not meant she was dangerous. It had meant something mattered. Peter could work with that. Lydia's first call to Peter came at 3:07 a.m. He woke before the phone rang because spider sense had already started pulsing. May heard him sit up. Call. Lydia. May nodded and went back to bed. Peter answered. No greeting. Lydia said, I hear water. Peter looked out. No rain. Where are you? My room. Are you in danger? I don't know. The old Peter would have suited up immediately. Peter now asked, do you want me there? A pause. Yes. He went as Peter. No mask. Lydia sat on her bedroom floor. Shoes on. Coat on. Ready to leave. That mattered. She had not called to be rescued. She wanted another person while figuring out the signal. Peter sat near the door. What does the water sound like? Running through pipes. Any words? No. Pain. Not mine. She closed eyes. Peter's spider sense pointed south. Faint. Lydia opened. South. They both had direction. Independent. They called Styles. He arrived with maps and exactly zero discretion. Together they traced old drainage lines. A culvert near the edge of town. They did not go alone. Sheriff Stalinsky was now inside enough of the supernatural map to receive a strange call without dismissing. He met. They found a body caught beneath Storm Grate. Already dead. No rescue possible. Lydia's call had been witness, not warning. Peter's sense had followed significance. Again. The sheriff handled the scene. Peter did not mask because he had done nothing illegal beyond trespassing near drainage. He stayed as Peter. Lydia stood beside him. I hate this. Peter looked. Which part? Knowing and not being able to change it. There. Peter understood deeply. He had built Spider-Man around changing things before they became irreversible. Lydia's gift often arrived at death. No action could save. Peter said, then maybe changing isn't always the job. Lydia looked. What is? Knowing someone was there. She stared at the body bag. That's depressing. Yes. No uplifting answer. Later, the dead man's family learned faster because the body had been found. That mattered. Not rescue. Closure. Lydia still hated. But the next time she heard a scream, she called sooner and did not apologize when it led to a person already dead. Peter stopped treating Spider-Sense as a challenge to outrun every tragedy. Sometimes the sense told him where to stand, while someone else did the necessary work. That was a different kind of helplessness. He was learning not to turn helplessness into failure automatically. Asterisk chapter 30. The web never breaks. The flooded service tunnel smelled like rust, algae, and Canema venom. Peter hated all three by the time he reached the lower gate. Scott was already waist-deep in water. Styles stood on a maintenance platform, trying to keep 3 civilians calm. Jackson, in Canema form, clung to the ceiling above the far end. Matt's control was stronger tonight. Or someone else had taken the chain after Matt's hold broke. Gerard. Peter suspected. No proof. The tunnel filled because someone had opened the storm gates intentionally. Water rose around trapped workers. The master did not need the Canema to kill everyone directly. Environment could. Peter jumped down. Evacuate first. Styles pointed. Doors jammed. Peter fired Webb the steel door. Pulled. The line slipped. Wet. Web adhesion weaker in contaminated water. Bad. He tried 2 anchors. The web began dissolving where the venomous runoff touched it. Worse. Scott moved toward Jackson. Peter grabbed his arm. Workers. Scott looked at the Canema. Then people. He nodded. They split. Peter went to the door physically. Hands under edge. Pulled. Metal groaned. 1 worker helped. Then another. The door opened enough. Styles moved civilians. Scott held Jackson's attention from the other side. The Canema attacked. Scott dodged. Peter heard impact. Wanted to turn. Didn't. His lane was the door until civilians cleared. Last worker got through. Peter moved. Jackson had Scott underwater. Peter jumped. No web. He grabbed the Canema's tail before the needle reached Scott. The venom grazed his glove. He twisted. Jackson turned. Peter used the wall to redirect instead of full strength. Scott surfaced. The Canema lunged again. Peter fired web upward. The strand held above water. He swung. Jackson followed. The master wanted Scott. Peter saw the pattern. Gerard stood behind the service grate above, hidden until Peter's spider sense pointed. There. Older man. Control object. Peter shouted, Scott. Scott looked up. Gerard smiled. Jackson attacked harder. Peter could chase Gerard or hold Jackson. He chose Jackson because Scott was in immediate danger. Styles on the platform saw Gerard. He did the other job. He triggered the emergency alarm and shouted into a phone. Sheriff, Chris, everyone. Gerard's secrecy collapsed. The older man retreated. Jackson faltered as distance increased. Scott got both arms around him. Peter added layered webbing from dry anchor points above the water. Not enough to hold forever. Enough, Jackson thrashed. Then human hands appeared. His face shifted. Peter. The voice barely worked. I'm here. Make it stop. Peter's throat tightened. We're trying. Scott said, Jackson, fight him. The wording came again. Peter almost corrected. No time. Jackson's hand reached his own throat, where the supernatural bond pulsed like a control line. Styles shouted from above. Gerard's outside. Peter looked. That was the choice only Scott could make. The decision no longer belonged to one person alone. Everyone in the tunnel had a role in keeping Jackson alive long enough to choose. Scott ran after Gerard. He could, but leaving Jackson might be bad. Peter said, Go, I'll hold. Scott hesitated. Peter nodded. Scott moved. Peter stayed with Jackson. Webs. Words. No magical cure. Jackson's tail snapped one line. Peter replaced. Second. Replaced. His wrists began draining. He could not do this forever. Jackson. The Kanama hissed. Listen. No response. Peter kept the mask sealed. Cameras could still be somewhere in the tunnel, and Jackson already knew who was underneath. You're not only this. The line sounded cliché, even to him. Jackson's claws cut another strand. Peter kept going. You're arrogant, you're exhausting. You owe Styles like 6 apologies. Styles shouted, more than 6. A twitch. Human. Peter saw. You're the guy who thinks being good at lacrosse makes him royalty. Another twitch. The scales receded near one cheek. Peter continued. You're also the guy who called before the last blackout. Jackson's breathing changed. The control was not only supernatural strength. It relied on Jackson, believing the transformed body was someone else. Peter gave him continuity. You remember the locker room. Human eye. You remember saying you didn't want anyone dead. The tail dropped. Jackson collapsed. The webs held a human boy instead of a monster. Peter almost fell from relief. Then the tunnel gate burst. Scott returned with Chris. Gerard had escaped. Again. But the master link had weakened enough. Jackson survived as a person. No one had made the final decision for him. At Deaton's clinic, Jackson slept under observation. Peter sat outside. Scott joined. You were right. Peter looked. About what? Not deciding early. Peter shook his head. Tonight doesn't prove every future. Scott sighed. Can you accept one win? Peter thought. Yes. They had saved civilians. Jackson was alive. Gerard had lost a control route. That was a win. Not complete. Good enough. May picked Peter up because his web reserves were empty and his leg was numb from a small venom exposure. No sneaking home. She drove. How bad? 6 out of 10. That sounds bad. It used to be 9. May did not appreciate. At home, she made him eat before asking anything. Peter told her. Not every detail. Enough. For the first time, the story of Spider-Man returning from a fight ended with someone else driving him home. Peter found he liked that more than disappearing alone across rooftops. Jackson woke at Deaton's clinic angry about the fact that everyone looked relieved. Peter noticed before anyone said anything. Scott was slumped in a chair. Styles had fallen asleep with his head against a cabinet. Deaton was writing. May had dropped off food and left after making Peter promise to eat. Jackson opened his eyes and saw the room. The relief moved through everyone. His face hardened. What? Scott stood. You're okay. Jackson looked at the web residue on his wrists. Then at Peter. No, I'm not. The room went still. Peter understood. Alive was not the same as okay. The Canema had been interrupted. Gerard's control route had weakened. Jackson still had missing time, fear, venom in his own body, and several people now knew what he could become. Scott sat again. You're right. Jackson looked almost disappointed that he had not been argued with. He tried to stand. His legs failed. Peter moved automatically. Jackson snapped, Don't. Peter stopped. Jackson grabbed the edge of the table and stood himself. It took longer. He made it. That mattered to him. Styles woke halfway through. Are we doing the emotionally healthy thing again? Jackson glared. Go back to sleep. Styles did not. Deaton checked Jackson's pupils, pulse, and the fading scale patches without touching until Jackson nodded. Peter watched that too. The clinic had become a place where everyone was learning the same lesson in different ways. Help did not require assuming the person had stopped being part of the decision. Jackson looked at Peter. You said Gerard got away. Yes. So he can do it again. Maybe. Great. Peter handed him food. Jackson stared. What is that? Turkey sandwich. I can see that. You haven't eaten. Jackson took it anyway. For several minutes, the biggest sound in the room was chewing. Then Jackson said, When I changed, I could hear you. Peter looked. How much? Not words at first. Jackson stared at the sandwich. Pressure, like somebody kept pushing me underwater, and your voice was above it. Scott leaned forward. Jackson continued. Then I heard the stuff about the locker room. He looked annoyed. You called me arrogant. You are. Not the point. Peter almost smiled. Jackson said, I remembered the blackout text. That had been the opening. Not a magical command. A memory he had chosen while human. Peter asked, Did that weaken Gerard? I don't know. Deaton answered from across room. It may have weakened the transformed identity's separation from Jackson. Styles sat up. In English. Deaton looked. Jackson remembered himself. Silence. Jackson hated how vulnerable the sentence sounded. Peter saw. He did not turn it into a theme. Instead, he said, Then we make a list. Jackson frowned. Of what? Things you remember that are definitely yours. That's stupid. Probably. Scott said, Do it anyway. Jackson glared at both. Styles already had a pen. Of course. The list began badly. Lacrosse. His car. Lydia. A scar on his knee from falling off a bike when he was 9. A terrible song he secretly liked and refused to name. The route from his house to school. His locker combination. One memory of his parents arguing. The fact that he hated pears. Styles looked up. Who hates pears? Jackson stared. People with taste. The room laughed. Not because anything was solved. Because a list about identity had included fruit. The next containment session used the list. When scales appeared, Scott did not shout, "Fight." Peter did not lecture. Styles read one item. Your locker combination is 1422-8. Jackson snarled, then corrected through clenched teeth. 1422-6. Styles checked. You're right. The Canamer's face twitched. Human irritation. Another. Lydia hates your car. She does not. She absolutely does. Jackson's hand became human for a second. They were not pulling him back with sentimental declarations. They were giving his mind ordinary friction. Specific things. Things Gerard had not authored. The transformation still completed. The webbing still needed layering. Scott still got thrown once. Peter took a tail strike to the shoulder guard. But Jackson remained more reachable. The next week, he remembered 15 minutes of a transformation. Then 20. Progress was not smooth. One night, he remembered nothing. Another, he woke furious and broke a sink. Deaton replaced the sink. Jackson paid. Peter liked that consequence because it was normal. Not punishment for being supernatural. You broke a sink. You pay for sink. May heard and said, good. Peter looked. Good. Consequences that aren't death. Fair. Gerard remained the active threat. They eventually traced one of his control contacts through an old hunter frequency Chris recognized. That lead came from Chris, not Peter. Another person doing the job they were best positioned to do. When Gerard tried to trigger Jackson again, the group was waiting. No final tunnel this time. A parking lot behind an empty shopping center. Chris blocked Gerard's transmitter route. Styles jammed the camera feed. Scott stayed with Jackson. Peter intercepted 2 hunter enforcers. Allison secured civilians from a nearby late-night store. No one central. Gerard realized too late. Jackson transformed partially. Peter heard him shout his own locker combination. Styles shouted, wrong again. Jackson cursed him. The scales receded. Gerard looked at Peter with disgust. You've turned weakness into ritual. Peter did not answer. He webbed the weapon out of Gerard's hand. Chris stepped forward. The older man's face changed more at seeing Chris than at Spider-Man. Family consequence. Peter stepped back. Not his confrontation to own. Jackson stood human behind Scott. No victory pose. He was breathing. That was enough. Later, Jackson found Peter alone outside Deaton's. You know, I'm still not joining your weird friend group. Peter looked. You are literally standing outside the clinic at 2 in the morning after helping us stop Gerard. Temporary. Sure. Jackson walked away. Then stopped. Thanks. Peter nodded. No speech. Jackson left. The Canamer arc had consumed weeks of Peter's life. The part he remembered most later was not the tail, venom, or tunnels. It was Jackson correcting Styles' number because even half-transformed, being wrong about his own locker combination was apparently intolerable. That was the sort of detail a monster story usually cut. Peter kept it. Asterisk Chapter 31, Spider Sense Asterisk. After the Canamer fight, Beacon Hills High became too quiet in the way a classroom becomes quiet when everyone has heard the rumor, but no one wants to ask the person involved. Jackson returned after several days. No one knew why he had been absent. Peter did. Scott did. Styles did. Lydia knew something. Allison knew enough to suspect that many partial truths created pressure. Meanwhile, Spider-Man stories multiplied. A masked figure on rooftops. Webbing at the tunnel. A rumor he had helped the Canema. A rumor he had killed it. A rumor he was the Canema. Styles showed Peter the last one at lunch. Peter stared. How? Internet. That doesn't answer. Someone thinks the tail is hidden under the suit. Peter closed his eyes. Scott laughed too hard. Jackson at the next table looked over. Peter kicked Scott. The larger problem arrived in Peter's locker. A strip of dried web. Not his. At least not fresh. Could be collected from an old scene. Someone had placed it with a note. How many people know? Peter's spider sense did not react to the paper. No immediate trap. Identity pressure. He did not pull the web out with bare hands. Styles found him staring. What? Peter stepped aside. Styles saw. His face changed. They moved the entire locker contents into a controlled bag after school. Deaton tested. The web was Peter's. Old. Environmental contamination. No foreign toxin. Someone had recovered it. Maybe Hunter. Maybe police. Maybe new faction. The question was psychological. How many people knew Peter was Spider-Man? Too many. Scott. Styles. May. Derek. Deaton. Possibly Chris. Jackson. Maybe Allison suspected. Peter felt the urge to close everything. Stop talking. Stop sharing. Move May. Abandon school. The same control reflex. Styles saw. Do not do the thing. What thing? The thing where you decide the solution to people knowing you is to become a hermit. Peter glared. Styles continued. The note wants you counting. That landed. The enemy, whoever it was, wanted knowledge itself to feel like failure. Peter looked at the list in his head. Those people were not equal leagues. Most knew because they had been involved in danger or had earned trust. The problem was not the number alone. It was whether someone outside consent had enough to weaponize. So they audited. Not people. Evidence. Police photos. Hunter files. School cameras. Web samples. Clothing. Timeline. Styles loved. Peter hated. They found one serious issue. 2 photographs showed the same bruise pattern on Peter Parker and Spider-Man within 48 hours. Not conclusive. Close. Peter changed suit padding and injury concealment practices. Another issue, web residue in school backpack. Fixed. Another, May's house cameras showing Peter leaving windows at odd hours. They moved patrol exits to garage, with May aware. No lying to her security system. The biggest clue was gait. Peter walked differently after injuries. Spider-Man too. No easy fix besides stop going to school hurt when possible. May strongly supported. Peter hated missing class, but agreed. The note itself gave no next lead. They did not let uncertainty become a hunt. At school, Styles watched Peter choose lunch instead of chasing the mystery. Growth. Stop. Scott arrived. What's growth? Peter is not ruining his day because someone mailed him anxiety. Peter threw a fry at him. The pressure eased. Then Jackson sat at the table without invitation. Everyone stared. He looked at Peter. I know. Peter's stomach tightened. Jackson continued. Your identity. Scott nearly choked. Styles muttered, settle. Jackson said, I figured it out before the tunnel. Peter looked. Why didn't you say? Jackson shrugged. You were helping me. Not noble. Practical. Then. I didn't tell anyone. Peter believed him enough. Jackson added, you should stop using the same jokes in the mask. Styles pointed. I have said this. Peter looked betrayed. Jackson almost smiled. The table had become a gathering of people carrying pieces of Spider-Man. Peter realized the note's question had an answer he had been framing wrong. How many people know? Enough that keeping the secret had become collaborative. That was dangerous. It was also why Peter had survived several fights. The enemy wanted the number to feel like weakness. Peter decided not to cooperate. The question in Peter's locker, how many people know, made May do something Peter had not considered. She made her own list. Not identities. Emergency contacts. If Peter disappeared for more than 6 hours beyond expected. Call Styles. Scott. Deaton. Then Sheriff Stalinsky. If Peter was injured and unconscious. Deaton first for supernatural. Hospital if life-threatening regardless of exposure. If someone threatened May. Call Sheriff, not Peter alone. That last one started an argument. Peter looked at the paper. If someone comes because of me, call me. May crossed her arms. I can call both. They might use you to pull me. Then why would I make you the only responder? Peter stopped. Of course. Gerard had built exactly that trap. Threaten loved one. Make hero central. May had no interest in becoming the lever. She put the list on the refrigerator inside a plain envelope. No superhero label. No names that meant anything to strangers beyond normal contacts. Peter stared. You're better at this than me. I've been an adult longer. Debatable. May smiled. The plan worked sooner than expected. A strange car parked across from the house for 40 minutes. May noticed. Peter was at school. She did not call him first. She called Sheriff, non-emergency. A patrol car passed. The strange car left. Could have been nothing. Could have been surveillance. No dramatic chase. Peter learned after class. His first reaction. Why didn't you call? May pointed at the list. Peter remembered. Right. She continued. If I had called you, what would you do? Leave school. Mask. Maybe. Follow car. Peter closed eyes. Probably. Exactly. The unknown driver might have wanted. May had denied. Peter laughed softly. She looked. What? The note wanted me counting how many people know. Yes. I think whoever wrote it assumes knowing me makes people weaknesses. May folded the laundry. That's lazy. Peter stared. She continued. People can be weak. People can also notice cars. Simple. Peter wrote nothing. He did not need every useful sentence in the notebook. Some could live in the kitchen and still count. Asterisk chapter 32. The spider sense awakens. The Alpha Pack Scout hit the rail bridge hard enough to bend a safety railing. Peter had thought Derek exaggerated Alpha strength. He stopped thinking that. Spider-Man swung under the first attack and landed on the bridge cable. The scout looked human, except for red eyes and claws. No introduction. No warning. Just testing. You're the spider. Peter balanced. Internet is efficient. The Alpha lunged. Peter's warning fired. He jumped. The claw cut through the steel cable sheath behind him. That changed the scale. Webbing would not hold by force. Peter needed structure. The bridge gave him structure. He fired 4 lines from opposite rails, creating a tension lattice across the walkway. The Alpha tore 1. The remaining 3 changed the floor's give. Peter used the imbalance to redirect the next charge. The Alpha hit a support post. No injury worth mentioning. But slowed. Peter swung overhead. Who sent you? The Alpha smiled. Someone who wants to know whether you're worth killing. Great networking opportunity. The scout jumped. Peter dodged. The claws clipped his mask. One lens cracked. Danger. Identity. He released a web line and dropped below the bridge. The Alpha followed over the side. No fear of falling. Of course. Peter swung under the structure. Wind. Water far below. The scout moved along steel supports like an animal. Peter's spider sense became continuous static. Derek's lesson. Do not obey every pulse. Look. The Alpha wanted to force Peter into using full strength. Every attack left a small opening. Bait. Peter refused. He targeted the bridge around them. Not damage. Movement. A web anchored to one cable. Another to a loose maintenance panel. He yanked. The panel swung into the Alpha's path. The scout cut it. That occupied both hands for half a second. Peter used the half second to change sides. The fight moved sideways along the bridge instead of toward town. Then the scout did something smarter. He attacked the civilian car, approaching the closed bridge lane. A family. Peter saw. Spider Sense screamed. There was the real test. Would he abandon fight? Yes. Of course. Peter swung. A claw had ripped part of the guardrail. The car skidded. Peter fired 2 webs to the rear axle, anchored to opposite bridge posts. The lines stretched. The car stopped inches before the broken edge. The driver screamed. Peter held. Web reserves burning. The Alpha watched from the cable above. Predictable. Peter looked up. You're saying that like saving people is embarrassing. The scout smiled. It makes you easy. Peter's arms shook. He kept the car stable until the family climbed out. Then he released. The Alpha had already left. No need to win. He got data. Peter got different data. Alpha Pack in Beacon Hills. They were studying him. More importantly, they would target bystanders to move him. Peter called Scott and Derek. Derek's reaction was immediate. Deucalion. Peter did not know the name. Derek did. Leader. Dangerous. The pack had arrived. Styles built a new board section. Of course. Peter's bridge footage appeared online within hours. Spider-Man saving the car. The Alpha absent from most frames. Public story, superhero rescue. Private truth, bait. May watched the video. You were hanging under a bridge. Yes. Why? Bad day. She stared. Peter added, Everyone lived. May's anger softened only because that was the point she cared about. Then she asked, "Did you learn anything that keeps this from happening again?" Peter thought, "Not enough." He met Derek at an empty basketball court the next day. "Train me against alphas." Derek looked at the cracked lens. "You can't beat them by strength." "I know." "Good. That's why I'm here." The next phase began. No powers upgrade. No miraculous new web formula. Just Peter learning how not to let stronger opponents decide the kind of fight he had to have. Asterisk Chapter 33. The Spider Sense Awakens. Derek's training court had no walls, which Peter suspected was deliberate. An empty outdoor basketball court behind an abandoned recreation building. 2 hoops. Chain link fence. Wet pavement. No rafters. No easy ceiling. Derek stood at center. Peter wore the mask. "Why here?" "You rely on height. Height is good. Until someone takes it away." Peter looked at the low lights. "Fair." Derek tossed a weighted chain at his feet. "Use that." Peter stared. "I have webs." "Exactly." Derek wanted him to solve the problem without the tool he trusted most. Peter picked up the chain. Heavy. Awkward. No supertech. He could still use strength. Derek attacked. Peter swung the chain. Terribly. Derek caught it and yanked. Peter almost lost balance. Spider sense warned. He moved, but Derek's second hand hit his shoulder. Dead. Peter glared. Again. He learned quickly that strength made bad technique more dangerous, not better. A human using the chain poorly might miss. Peter using it poorly could break a fence, a wrist, his own rhythm. He stopped swinging like a weapon. Used it as weight. Anchor. Trip line. Lever. The third round, he looped it around a fence post and changed Derek's approach. Better. The fifth, he dropped it entirely when it became a liability. Derek nodded. Good. Peter looked offended. You're enjoying this? Yes. Then Derek shifted. Derek's eyes burned red as he let more of his alpha strength show. The warning intensified. Derek attacked faster. Peter moved. No webs for first minute. He used court lines. Fence. Backboard support. Open gate. The lack of vertical space forced him to treat retreat as movement rather than escape upward. Derek cornered him near fence. Peter saw one opening. The open gate behind Derek. To reach it, Peter would have to move toward the claws. He went. Derek swiped. Peter ducked inside the reach. Used Derek's momentum. Shoulder. Turn. Not overpower. He slipped past. Gate. Clear. Derek stopped. Again. Peter's breathing was hard. You're a terrible person. Again. The next drill allowed webbing, but only one line at a time. That was harder than no webbing. Peter's habit was redundancy. Layered webs. One line forced choice. Anchor Derek. Move himself. Protect an exit. He could not do all. The first line he wasted on a dodge. Derek tore it. Second round, Peter used the one line to pull an open gate wider for a hypothetical civilian and took a claw across his arm. Derek stopped. You got hit. The civilian didn't. There is no civilian. Then stop putting one in the drill. Derek looked. Peter realized he had. Every scenario in his head contained someone to save. That was not always useful. Derek said, "You need to know the difference between a rescue and a fight." Peter wiped the shallow cut. "Why?" "Because if there is no one to protect, you can leave." That should have been obvious. Peter had been treating every hostile encounter as something he needed to finish. The Alpha Scout. Peter Hale. Hunters. If no civilian. No immediate threat. He could simply leave. Derek attacked again. Peter did not fight. He webbed the far fence and vaulted out. Derek stopped. Good. Peter landed outside. That feels like cheating. It isn't. The lesson stayed. After training, Derek sat on the bleachers. Peter removed the mask halfway to drink water. "Why are you helping me?" Derek looked toward the court. "Because the Alpha Pack will use you against Scott if they can." "That's strategic." "Yes." "Anything else?" Derek's expression tightened. Peter almost withdrew the question. Then Derek said, "You come when people call." That was the answer. Not pack. Not friendship. Reliability. Peter looked down at the bruises. "That sounds like a bad